Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. It's August 2025, and about 9 months ago, I posted the first chapter of Capital, Volume 1 by Marx. This is an intimidating book, on a number of counts. First off, it's long. I remember growing up, anytime that somebody would need to make a reference to a really big book, it would either be the dictionary, War and Peace, or Das Kapital. It was a punchline because it represented a book that basically no one could read, and anybody who did was some kind of, alien. So it's formidable. People have built it up in their minds, and there's this sort of cultural approach to this book, which is like, whoa, it's unapproachably long, and it's also full of really taboo and complicated stuff that would just melt your brain if you ever tried to engage with it. And I think that we're seeing that showing up in the view stats for this video series, which I started posting 9 months ago. But now it is August, and my plan is to finish this recording in the next couple of months. In fact, I'm going to be working really steadily at it and basically doing nothing else. So I want to kind of pivot you, as the audience, I want to collectively pivot your attention to taking in this work, because it's what we're going to be focusing on for the next 2 months. And as part of the effort to make that pivot, we have to look at where we are now in relation to where we have to go. And that'll tell us how much effort is required to make the change, course correction, etc. So I held up kind of a mirror on the community post by making a graph of the actual view counts. And I've seen a couple of people have really weird reactions to this, like, don't get caught up in the stats. No, the stats are telling me you haven't listened to this at all. I started posting this 9 months ago. What do we have? We have prefaces, about 8,000 views, chapter 1, about 16,000 views, then chapter 2, about 2,000 views. And it just goes down from there. Now, I know this because why? I had planned to have finished this in like May, but I started deprioritizing it because I saw people just weren't keeping up with what I was posting. So I could either, keep posting videos that were going from like 1,200 to 1,000 to 800 to 600 to 400 views, or I could cover other stuff that people were actually going to watch and that would get thousands of new subscribers to the channel. So at some point, I did start deprioritizing Capital and started covering some other stuff. And to be honest, with the changeover from Biden to Trump, and some of the Bernie Sanders SOCDEM related stuff, there were some videos that I wanted to cover. There's also a looming recession, which has been building and building. We're in a gigantic economic bubble right now, and when that pops, it's probably going to be bigger than 2008. Talking about that for a while on the live streams. Anyway, there's been other stuff to cover. However, we were always going to come back to this eventually because the readings are what this channel really is about. Not going to lie though, recording Capital is a huge effort. In the end, it's going to be about 30 hours, something like that. I mean, really enormous work. And while I'm not really chasing after superficial engagement with the channel, and I don't want the kind of subscribers that are never going to do any reading, the audience of this channel is on a spectrum from hardcore communist who's super dedicated, does every reading that they can, really studies the history, to disaffected SOCDEM who is a potential communist ally, and maybe we can at least get them to read The State and Revolution. And both of those things are important. Personally, I'm much more on the hardcore side. I do these readings out of an intense passion to create a new world and to do the study that's required to see how do we get past capitalism and to break out of the knowledge and information desert that capitalism has put us in, particularly with regard to revolutionary social science. So that's the thing I'm going to do. It's a track I've been on for decades, and I want to help as many of you come along as is possible, because the more, the better. We do need lots of people to do this. We need a movement, and it needs to be informed by the history of the international communist movement, which again, Americans in particular, but also Europeans and etc., are really cut off from. So it does take work, it takes study, you can't just vibe this. It's called scientific socialism for a reason. You can't vibe it any more than you can vibe advanced chemistry. So coming back to the graph, when we see an 80 to 90% drop-off between chapter 1 and literally the next few chapters, I mean, honestly, starting with chapter 2, what it gives is I opened chapter 1 and just quit, gave up, walked away. Tell me this isn't what happened. I mean, I know it's what happened. First of all, there wasn't a really long pause between chapters 1, 2, and 3. And yes, chapter 2 is a lot shorter than chapter 1, but chapter 3 is the same length as 1. So as far as, chapter 1 being a lot of rewatches, accounting for a boosted stat, that should equally apply to chapter 3. So no, people aren't watching it. And that's a sad thing because to be a communist, this is one of the books you have to tackle at some point. You just do. Now, I wouldn't be saying anything if there had been like a 30% drop-off, 40% drop-off, 50, even 60% drop-off, but we're talking about like a complete collapse in the people making it from chapter 1 to chapter 2. Okay, much more of this screen should be those blue bars representing views of these videos, but it's a complete collapse. So the point of this video and the point of that community post is not just to tell you that you're bad people. I mean, that may be true in some cases. But the point is actually just to say, look, I know you can do better than this. You know you can do better than this. Whatever is preventing you from engaging with this text, and to me, this chart just screams avoidance. Whatever the psychological block you have on this thing is, you've got to, now's the time, in other words, to finish this thing. I know you started it. I can see the stats on chapter 1. Now you got to come back. It's time. And as far as just, I'm new here. No, when I posted this, there were almost 30,000 subscribers, so that doesn't really explain why chapters 2 and 3 only have 2,000 views. It's, in other words, not like most of the viewership became subscribers since this was posted. That's just not the case at all. And there is a much larger pattern, you know it, I know it, of quote-unquote communists not doing the reading. To me, this chart is wholly reflective of that. We had all the comments that was like, let's go, and the absolute mad lad, he's doing it. And then by chapter 5, we got a 90%, 95% drop-off. That's pathetic. Now, I know not everybody's going to make it to chapter 5 of Capital, but 95% of you? Come on. We can at least get that down to like 60% of you didn't make it that far. Honestly, I'd be happy with that. Genuinely. I would not have made this post, let me reiterate, had that been the case. Now, there's also been another sort of overreaction to this text, which to me, the reason that I opened this video talking about the mythos, the aura, the mystique around this book, is that some people have had the opposite reaction. And upon seeing this pop up, they freaked out in the other direction, ran out, bought a physical set of the entire Marx and Engels collected works and Lenin. And if you really want that, fine, but it's by no means required, and the amount of people talking about that, with reference to Capital in particular, again to me speaks to the mystique around this book, and people either feeling like it's unapproachable and they can't engage with it, it's way above them, or the only way that they can engage with it is by buying like a 200-pound leather-bound set that takes up, 3 bookshelves. You don't need to do that. Just be a normal communist who reads without somebody kicking your ass to do it, pay a normal amount of attention, take a normal amount of notes, and seek out discussion about it. Okay, these are normal communist studying things to do. What is less good is, again, 90% drop-off after chapter 1. I know you can do better. Now, there's a lot of people who've been saying also, I was waiting for the whole thing to be posted. Why? It's 30 hours long. Were you thinking you were going to just absorb all this in one shot? Not going to happen. Also, what did you think? I was just going to keep posting videos no one was watching for like 6 months on end? No. Obviously, that contributed to the slowdown and my perception that, hey, nobody's watching these things, and I'm going to prioritize posting something else because obviously the audience is not ready to follow along. Now, I did have some people exempt themselves from the criticism by saying, well, I stopped watching the videos because your posting slowed down. And you know what? That's fair. I exempt you from this criticism. But, overall, I was hoping that this was something that we could do collectively as a channel and audience as we went. And as usual, I don't know, trying to do this shit on YouTube, I'm just continually baffled by audience behavior. There's obviously like a 5 or 10% of you this doesn't apply to, but as for the rest, I just don't know. But let's get into the schedule so that we can get this thing finished. All right, we got 8 weeks on the screen. First, August 3rd through 9. We were working on the extremely longest chapter in the book, chapter 15, and we posted part 1 of 8. There are 8 parts to Capital. That's in Marx's official grouping of the chapters, and that's, kind of like chapters grouped together by topic. 8 parts. And since you can't upload like a 30-hour video to YouTube, I'm going to be compiling these into the 8 parts, and that's as condensed as it's going to get. So in the end, there won't be one big Capital complete video. There are going to be these 8 parts. So once you see those, that's the final product. Don't wait. It's just not getting any more done than that. So August 10 through 16, we're going to be finishing up chapter 15 with sections 8 through 10, and that'll be the end of part 4. So by parts, we'll be halfway through at that point. And then at the end of that week, for the weekend, we'll also be posting part 2 of 8, the completed chapters 4 through 6 compiled. Then the next week, the 17th through 23rd, chapters 16 through 20, which will mark the completion of part 5 with the completion of chapter 18, which is the end of part 5. And we'll also be posting part 3 of 8. Now, let me point out, part 1 of 8 is 6.5 hours. Part 2 of 8 is much shorter, like an hour and a half. Part 3 of 8 is again over 6 hours, so don't wait. You know, you could look at it as this is 8 books, which add up to one really big book. Now, if you knew you had 8 books to read, how long would you wait before starting the first one? I would not really wait, because even just your first pass is going to take a really long time, and then I'm going to be done with that, and I'm going to move on to posting other things, but you won't be able to keep up with those because you're going to still be stuck on the stuff that I had posted over the previous 11 months that you decided to wait till month 11 to start listening to, and you won't be able to keep up. This is also assuming, by the way, that you're going to get all of Capital on your first try. On the first pass, you're just not going to need to review it or anything. Anyway, August 24 to 30, we have planned chapters 21 to 24, and that will complete part 6, and then we will post the part 4 of 8 completed video, which again is going to be really long. Chapter 15 is the longest in the book. It, by word count, is equivalent to about 3 of chapter 1. Now, it's not as formula heavy, and it's not as sort of abstract as chapter 1. It's much more grounded in the history of the factory system, and there's a lot more colorful, it's less dry. There's a lot of examples of what was going on in this factory or this industry, etc. But it is long, it's lengthy, and it's just going to take a lot of time to absorb it. All right, so that pretty much takes us through August. Now, for the second month, the first 2 weeks are going to be spent on chapter 25. It's the second longest chapter in the book, about 2/3 as long as chapter 15, or in other words, about twice as long as chapter 1. But when that's done, that'll be the end of part 7, and then we just have a bunch of short chapters which make up part 8. But in keeping with the posting 1 part per week thing, we are going to maintain that rhythm. And in the week of August 31st to September 6th, we're going to post the part 5 of 8 compiled video. And the next week, the 7th through 13th, we're going to post the part 6 of 8 compiled video. Then the last 2 weeks are September 14 to 20 and 21 to 27. In those weeks, respectively, we're going to do chapters 26 to 30 and the part 7 of 8 compiled video, and then chapters 31 to 33 and the part 8 of 8 compiled video, at which point Capital Volume 1 will be complete. In closing, I'm just going to say that I'm in a really different place now than when I started doing this channel. I'm even in a different place than when I started posting Capital last year. I believe more than ever in the correctness of Marxism-Leninism. And I also understand more than ever where a lot of the revisionism comes from. Yeah, some of it is deliberate bourgeois influence trying to infiltrate and corrupt the movement. Some of it is people who are captured by bourgeois ideas and don't want to give them up. But the real backdrop to me is people calling themselves communist and just not doing the study. There's a video I posted in January of 2024. The title is "We Are in a Struggle Right Now with Capitalism on the Basis of Wages" by Stalin from 1950. Look that up. There's a part where Stalin says this, quote, "The first older generation of Bolsheviks was well grounded. We memorized capital, summarized, argued, and tested one another. This was our strength. This helped us a lot. The second generation was less prepared. People were busy with practical work and construction. They studied Marxism through brochures. The third generation has been raised on pamphlets and newspaper articles. They don't have a deep understanding of Marxism. They must be given food that is easily digestible. The majority of them were raised on quotations, not the study of Marx and Lenin. If things continue this way, people might degenerate. People may decide that they don't need capital, meaning the book, when we are building socialism. This threatens degradation. This will mean death. In order to avoid this, even in part, it is necessary to raise the level of economic understanding." Unquote. So we need more actual Bolsheviks, as Stalin described there. Which group do you want to be in?